one of the things that we're bringing to you in this discussion about vulnerability is that it's not purely an individual capacity. It is a shared relational capacity. Welcome back to the Experience of We. I'm Matthew.
I'm Naomi.
And let's start talking about vulnerability. And I really mean let's start talking about vulnerability because we are going to have an ongoing, evolving conversation about vulnerability as part of the Experience of We. Because the Experience of We is at its core a practice and participation system for helping people incrementally move their relationships closer to our evolutionary baseline.
Of deep trust and safety.
Of deep trust and safety, exactly. And there is no way to do that without developing a dynamic and ongoing relationship with the phenomenon we call vulnerability.
Yeah. Vulnerability is a phenomenon that most of us are familiar with. It is characterized by feeling activated, hyper present, maybe a little upregulated, open, exposed, because vulnerability is the experience and the practice of sharing something that's real about ourselves without knowing for certain how it's going to be received. And so one of the truths about vulnerability is it's not just a feeling. It is our body's truth about how we orient to whatever relational experience we're having and to ourselves.
Yeah. It's also one of our body's natural trust building tools, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Vulnerability is a way that we can gauge how safe we are with someone. If we are vulnerable and we have the process of being received in ways that feel empowering and safe and things like that, our bodies trust the relationship a bit more. And then we have the capacity to be a little bit more vulnerable, to share more of our inner truth or our inner experience with someone else. And it's sort of this incremental process of being vulnerable and being caught and feeling safer and being vulnerable and being, by caught, I mean like a trust fall, catching someone when they fall. Every time that happens, we can trust someone more.
Oh, and if you don't mind me saying, I really don't like interrupting you, but
we are having we're playing ball.
Yeah.
We're playing energy ball with the conversation.
Playing a catch.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I wanted to name about trust is that when we have a moment of vulnerability, when we expose ourselves to someone in a way that we don't know how it's going to be received, and then that vulnerability is received gracefully, lovingly, with care and dignity, not only do we then trust the other person more, we also trust the relationship more, and we trust ourselves more. When a vulnerable thing is exposed and it is received well, that sense of that part of us being vulnerable decreases somewhat, and we're able to feel more secure in bringing that part of ourselves out. And so the trust building actually happens three ways. When we are vulnerable and then the person receives our vulnerability well, we trust them more, we trust the relationship more, we trust ourselves more. And so it's a powerful, powerful trust building tool.
Yes, man, I'm so glad that you took the energy ball to say that. It's powerful and true. And at the same time, that incremental self-reinforcing process can also go the other way. Because withholding vulnerability, we can like consciously intervene and decide when to be vulnerable, but also our capacity for it is regulated by our nervous system, is regulated by our bodies. And so if we do not feel fully safe, our bodies will not give up as much energy to be vulnerable. If we don't feel safe, it might take a really big push of energy to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And if we are not received with grace and love and safety in the trust fall of that vulnerability, then that, in that tripartite way that Matthew is describing, that both decreases our sense of trust in the other person, our trust in the relationship, and our trust in ourselves, our trust in both that whatever we revealed is lovable, and also trust in our own judgment. It can impact our sense of trust in our own judgment if we are not received in our vulnerability with love and safety. And yeah, we learn about the relationship, we learn about the other person, and so it too can become a self-reinforcing feedback loop, and does very frequently, where we have experiences of being vulnerable and not being fully received, and our bodies naturally pull back. And then the next time they're vulnerable, we're more in a defensive posture, and maybe they're not received. And it can create this feedback loop, this reinforcing feedback loop of escalating senses of unsafety.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that, and this is aligned with our lived experience. Vulnerability helps build trust, and or degrades trust, and whichever like it's directional. Momentum gets built over time, and so if you make a trust fall and you're received well, you're more likely to take another trust fall, and if that is received well, you're more likely to take another trust fall, and then trust and intimacy can grow in that trajectory. By contrast, if you make a trust fall and you're dropped, now you'll be less likely to make another trust fall. If you do it again and you're dropped again, oh, now you're even less likely.
Right. And both less likely in terms of if that happens, we don't feel as naturally inclined to do it, but also less likely in terms of it takes greater energy over time to keep exposing ourselves to vulnerability. If our bodies keep learning, we're going to be dropped in that particular relationship.
Right. So, in other words, if we've been dropped a few times in a relationship, the effort, the energy, the thrust that we need to be vulnerable again actually increases.
Yes,
And that reduces our capacity to make the trust fall.
exactly. And so right now we've been talking to you about kind of the most extreme cases of spirals of escalating vulnerability and escalating being received, escalating trust, or escalating vulnerability and escalating unsafety. And those are kind of the extremes. But the truth is that relationships in terms of receiving vulnerability, rarely, if never, are all one thing or all the other. Most relationships have some proportion of each. And what proportion of each there is often determines the outcome of the relationship. And we've had so many experiences just in our relationship of going along and taking these vulnerability trust falls and lovingly catching each other with dignity and having that happen a lot, and then get to something where for whatever reason it's harder for one of us to receive it with grace, with safety, with empowerment and dignity, and that happens too. And then that becomes the trust fall. The trust fall becomes, do we disclose when it doesn't feel good?
Right.
Do we take on the vulnerability of saying, well, this reinforced my sense of fear about sharing this part of myself?
Right. And now my vulnerability around being a trustworthy partner is excited or agitated by that. And so one of the things that we're bringing to in this discussion about vulnerability is that it's not purely an individual capacity. It is a shared relational capacity. The most courageous person in the world would lose their capacity to be courageous if all of their relationships consistently punish them for their courage. Everyone's sense of safety, taking chances, can be degraded by having our vulnerability or our, which is also sometimes considered like courageousness, bravery, like the willingness to take on risk and be vulnerable. If those trust falls consistently and reliably lead to some kind of wounding, relational wounding, we will start to close off over time. And it's, in some cases, it's even beyond conscious choice because, as Naomi said earlier, our nervous system will take on defensive postures against vulnerability unconsciously without us choosing. If someone gets hurt repeatedly in an emotional relationship, their body will start, our bodies will start, human bodies will start to shield against vulnerability. And so in this way, we can see that our capacity to be vulnerable is constrained by our companion's ability to receive our vulnerability. And so I think I want, I would invite you to sit with that. I would invite you to sit with that, Naomi. You, our companion, because speaking for myself, especially like I was born in 1975, and I was born into a male body, and I was born into a social reality that said I needed to take a lot of risks. I needed to be brave and I needed to be courageous, which is another way of saying you need to make vulnerability a life practice and absorb blows and not show that you're absorbing them and be tough it out when something doesn't go your way. And I did learn to be a risk taker, but I didn't learn to be with the vulnerability. I suppressed my anxiety that was being brought on by not having my vulnerability well received in many cases.
Yep.
And I didn't build my capacity either to develop individual resilience to vulnerability, but also to choose my relationships based on their capacity to be with me in my vulnerability. And I would say, honestly, Naomi, you were the first person that could really be with me in my vulnerability in my life.
Yes, because that's actually a deeply emotional thing for me to hear. I care very much about it. And I'm only not sinking more into the moment because I want to talk to you specifically. When we bring vulnerability to a relationship, we also invite and expose other people's vulnerabilities necessarily. Matthew sharing his emotional and personal experience was actually really intense. Matthew was having a very intense emotional experience.
When I met you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was experiencing a divorce. And it was a very, very painful one. My life was coming apart. I was in an incredible amount of pain that I couldn't express.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of why Matthew had trouble expressing the pain was that there wasn't a culture of like other men or even people around him who like cried and talked about their feelings and held each other accountable and things like that.
Yeah.
And so when Matthew started to dip into some of his deep, powerful underlying feelings, it would bring up the vulnerabilities of the other people in his life, of his
Yeah.
companions. And I'm telling your story. Do you have it?
Yeah. I mean, I needed to cry.
Yeah.
I needed to cry a lot, actually. But when I went to most of my peer group at the time were other men, masculine-bodied people who also had been conditioned out of showing vulnerability. And so when my vulnerability would start to come up, they would become uncomfortable. And so I wasn't able to express the depth of my emotional pain.
Yeah, and honestly, like just speaking for both of us here, because I was in my own fire when Matthew and I met, and I, being a girl, there was more space for crying. A girl in my environment. Uh, but what needed to come out of me wasn't just like, I feel really bad, but was like racking sobs and snot dripping down my face and like some really like powerful non-normative grief honestly needed to come up.
Right. Well, you were the child of a second wave feminist, and part of what that meant was she didn't participate in that kind of emotion.
Yeah.
In part because of her feminism and other things. And so you were conditioned to also be a sort of like tough girl who didn't cry and didn't show
Yeah,
emotions,
like
right?
Matthew, I learned how to take risks and suppress the vulnerability of doing them. And this journey, making the experience of we, has just fed us both back just all of our vulnerability.
Yeah, yeah, we're feeling vulnerability right now. Just
Yeah,
making
in this
video.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, making a video about vulnerability, we're feeling it. And so we needed to start this conversation. That's what this video is for. Start this conversation. It's going to be ongoing because what we all need, what we all we humans need to understand, firstly, that vulnerability is a large part of how we build deep, trusting connections, life bonds, basically. We cannot build deep connection without deepening vulnerability. And vulnerability is a shared experience. Sometimes when we are vulnerable with someone, we are exposing their vulnerabilities. We did a video about saying I love you. Saying I love you is a vulnerable thing. It also exposes the person receiving the I love you, especially if you haven't, if it's the first time you've told someone that you love them. Yes, you are being vulnerable. And yes, you were exposing the other person to the vulnerability of the expectations of love. The first time I told Naomi that I loved her, she was definitely not going to say it back. I knew that because I knew that you would receive it as, uh-oh, he says he loves me. What does he expect from me?
That's totally how I received it. And I needed to go a good long time observing his actions and seeing whether he now felt that I should be obligated to do more.
Yeah.
Because he loved me.
Yeah, and I said, hey, I love you. And what I mean by that is I deeply respect you. And I have a desire to keep building a long-term connection with you that is not, that doesn't need to become explicitly romantic.
Yes, yes. And he was saying all of that, all of these completely wholesome things. And I was like,
Yeah, yeah, she didn't even respond directly. We just moved to the next source of conversation.
Until I got sufficient data to be able to trust it and eventually share my own feelings.
And so yeah, so that's an example about how me being vulnerable with Naomi exposed her to vulnerability, and that is oftentimes true. And so because vulnerability is a shared mechanism for deepening trust and intimacy, that means it is relational. It is not purely an individual capacity. And that's what we would invite you to spend some time thinking about in terms of your own relationship with vulnerability, to come to that awareness, to look at yourself when you're feeling a desire to be vulnerable, when you're receiving someone else's vulnerability. We would invite you to just notice that vulnerability is a shared relational capacity, not a purely individual capacity.
Yeah. And so as you go forward from this video and you're noticing the shared capacity of vulnerability, we invite you also to notice when it comes up in your day-to-day life, which relationships it feels alive in, whether you feel safe engaging in those relationships, what kinds of subjects it comes up around. Because it's it is a human experience that always has the capacity to happen, because it's just revealing something true in the presence of uncertainty in a relationship. So it's always there, but how does it express?
And so, if you want to drop some comments about your own experience of vulnerability as a relational capacity, please do. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you next time.
Talk to you later.
Bye for now.